We all experience suffering. Sometimes it crushes our spirits so much that we become bitter. And we all know people who are suffering or who have suffered. Most people don't know what to say to those who suffer and end up avoiding such situations or saying unhelpful or even hurtful things. Cliches. Hi, I'm Dr. Bruce Robinson, and I recently wrote this book, Behind the Tears, Understanding, Surviving and Growing from Suffering, and it was shortlisted for the Christian Book of the Year. I wrote this book because as a doctor for many years, I've seen a lot of suffering, not just the sort of suffering you see on the evening news, but up close and personal with hundreds of cancer patients, people with mental illness, and also the innocent people who suffer in awful disaster situations. I've learnt that absolutely everyone will suffer. Also, everyone will be around people who suffer. I've also learnt that if you don't take time to talk about suffering and read about it, it can lead to loneliness and bitterness. And it can also cause you to hurt people by your words and actions, often without you actually really knowing. And all of this applies to Christians and non-believers alike. So this is a Bible-based book that can fix that. Readers are finding this book helpful because it differs from other books on suffering by focusing mostly on practical aspects of suffering rather than the important intellectual or theological issues. I have a deep desire in my heart to help those who suffer, and I especially want to help people who ask in anger or frustration, why did God allow this suffering? How can I get through it? I also want to help those who care for sufferers, whether they are in the home, the workplace, school or playgroup, or in the community, including in churches. And I have often heard people after church or at work say unhelpful and often hurtful things despite the best of intentions. I experienced that myself after church when my wife had breast cancer. Out of compassion, people said things that they thought were helpful, but they were so unhelpful that I found myself avoiding them and sneaking out and heading home just before the church finished each week. Another friend of mine in a different church was in the same situation. His wife had breast cancer, and his friends, despite trying to be helpful with all their attempts to be caring and express their concern, caused him such discomfort that he described being pecked by crows and having nowhere to go. Wow, that was a powerful image for me. It took me days to get it out of my head. By reading this book, you will learn three main things. First, how to understand suffering. Why does it ever happen? And what misconceptions are common? Is God punishing me? Will I be healed? And I discuss the different types of suffering, from terminal cancer through to chronic physical challenges and evil. And then the more hidden and embarrassing suffering that people often don't talk about and therefore others don't know. This is mental illness and suicide, sexuality challenges, substance abuse, and the hidden soul-destroying suffering of conflicts. Second, I talk about how to survive suffering, and this book provides helpful tips for those on the journey of suffering and for their families and carers, friends, and importantly, pastoral carers. How can they best show compassion and not hurt people? Finally, the book describes the crucial topic of how to grow from suffering. It has been said, and I've seen this so often, that suffering handled badly can make people bitter. But if it's handled well, it can make people better. And this book describes ways to make that happen. How to avoid the prison of bitterness and to grow into a better person, turning your suffering into beautiful service, Jesus-like compassion, and a brighter future. And none of that is automatic. That's why I've made the book so practical, with dozens of stories, examples and tips, and why I was asked by many people actually to write it in the first place. This book will definitely help you and those you share it with, perhaps in home groups. Finally, please share this video with other people whom you think might be suffering or might be in contact with people who are suffering, and also contact us with your own personal stories to help encourage others.